In a previous video, I gave a demonstration of how VBA can be used to automate an Excel spreadsheet. I showed you an example where I turned a simple form into a powerful data logging tool that would log data from a 5S audit sheet into a table, create a PDF of the form, and send an email notification, all with the click of a button. In this video, as requested by Jed Robertson, I'll be showing you how to actually create the code necessary to automate those tasks. So big thank you to Jed for your comment and engagement. I'm always happy to make a video from requests or questions if I think they'll be valuable for everyone. So with that, let's check out how we can make this form. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on creating this spreadsheet portion of this and like all the formatting and adding all this stuff in here. I think the more interesting portion of this is the VBA and everything. So the one thing I did want to go through with this spreadsheet though is this data validation and how to set that up, because it's kind of a cool little trick, being able to select from one list and having another list depend on that list. So meaning when I select fabricating, it only shows the zones that are in the fabricating department. Same for machining, only shows the machining zone. So I'll show you how to set that up, and then we'll get into the VBA. In order to add that data validation, we have to go to the Data tab, and then in this version of Excel, it's this little button here. And then when we select the range that we want to add data validation to, and then click that, this will say that it contains cells with data validation. Do you want to extend the data validation to these cells? Please say yes. So it's just basically saying there's already data validation there. Do you want to add that? So what this is saying for data validation is that we're looking at this range, so you can only select from a list that's in this range. So these are the values you can select from for departments. Just hit OK there. And then what's kind of more interesting is the zone is dependent on what department is selected. So for this one, we have to do it a little bit differently. If we look at what's in there, we have to use this formula saying indirect and department. So department is a named range right here. You can see we named this department. So the range that we're going to pick is actually the value that's in here. So what that means is if I select this range right here, we can see that's a named range called fabricating. So this is the range that would be selected if we select fabricating here, and then same for the other ranges. So that's kind of how that works. All right, so onto the VBA. The first thing we'll need to do is make sure we have the Developer tab activated. So you can just go to File, and then Options, go down to the Customize ribbon here, and just make sure Developer is checked there. So that's all you have to do there. And then you'll have the Developer tab activated, and this gives us all the VBA options that we'll need to create this. So the first step will be to add a ActiveX control, which would be just a command button that will allow us to initiate the code from the spreadsheet. So we'll bring up the properties for that, and we'll change the caption to log data. Okay, and then close that, and when we double click this, it loads the VBA window for that command button. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in main, and what that's doing is it's going to call a subroutine. We haven't created it yet, but when this code runs, or when that button is clicked, it'll run this main subroutine. So let's create that subroutine. We'll start a new module, create a new module, and we'll call it submain. Enter, and now we just created our main subroutine. And this is what's going to execute the rest of the code. So with this, we'll go userform one.show. We haven't created it yet, but this will activate a user form, or the form that will give the user the options and tell VBA what code we want to run. So now we can create that user form, and it automatically creates user form 1. So why don't we just go ahead and test this right away? So if we hit close, switch it off of design mode, when we click log data, it shows that user form. There's nothing in there yet, but that's just kind of the foundation for everything else we're going to be building off of. So let's go back to the VBA window, and we will actually start by creating the user form and filling in all the controls we need for the user. We'll create a checkbox, and then I'm just going to copy and paste a few more of these. So slide those over so we can see them. So now we have some checkboxes, and then we can edit the labels. So create PDF. What this is doing is it's allowing the user to tell VBA what code we want to run. So maybe they don't want to create a PDF necessarily. And then we'll also create two buttons, an OK and a cancel. Command button. OK, and cancel. So now we want to give these controls some names. So first we'll just go to the View tab and make sure we have the Properties window active on the side here. So create PDF. We're going to rename this to Check PDF. We'll call this one Check Log Data, Check Clear Form, Check Email, Check Close. We'll name this CB for Command Button, OK, and CB, oops, cancel. Alright, so now we have everything named. So now we can go to our module and create some more subroutines here. Let's kind of tighten up that a little bit, and then we're going to create a sub log data, sub send email, sub close form, create PDF. The first thing we need to do is set up the data validation. So what we'll do is we'll define some variables. So we're going to say dim audit form as workbook, dim my sheet as worksheet, dim my log as workbook, dim log sheet as worksheet, and dim audit date as date. So this will kind of all come together, but really we're just defining some variables and setting some parameters for these different variables. So we'll know that log sheet has to be a worksheet, that kind of thing. So in the main routine, we'll set up some validation. So we'll say if range auditor equals nothing or blank, then we'll send a message box to the user and we'll say, please enter value for the auditor field. And then we'll do a colon, which is basically a continuation of the code, just so we can keep it all in one line. And then we'll say range auditor. Make sure to put that in quotes. Dot select. So we'll select the range that we need them to fill out. And then we'll say exit sub. So this range auditor, that's a named range within our spreadsheet. So you need to make sure that the range for auditor is named auditor. So back to the VBA. We're just going to copy this. 6 total. So instead of auditor, we'll say audit date. And just basically do the same thing for each of the other fields that we want to make sure that are filled out before we run the code. And I'll slide this over so you can see everything. So instead of auditor, it'll be audit date. Sustain score. All right. So now we have our data validation set up. And once everything's good, then it'll show that Userform 1. Alright, so for the log data routine, we'll set some variables equal to, or we'll define what the variables are equal to. So audit form, our audit form variable, we'll set that equal to application.active, active workbook, and then we'll set my sheet equal to audit form.active sheet. So that's defining these variables as the current workbook and sheet that we're currently in. Just add some comments in here so we know what we're doing. We will this will be define variables and set variables. Auditor. So now we're setting the auditor variable equal to whatever is in this range. Shift variable is equal to range. The name range called shift. Sort score, more of the same. We're just setting these Variables and giving them values so we can manipulate them with VBA. Sustain. And total deviations. and then we want to error proof this. So if we get any errors during this code, then we'll have a little error catcher on error. Resume next, which just means if there's an error, just keep going in the code, which isn't necessarily the best way to do things, but it's just kind of a quick way to make sure that the user doesn't see any errors. We're going to turn off screen updating. And what this is doing is when you have screen updating turned off, the user won't see any of the things that the code does. So if it changes anything about the spreadsheet, it doesn't show those changes until we turn screen updating back on. Screen updating equals false. Set my log to application.workbooks.open, and then we'll need to tell it what workbook we want to open. So we defined what variables we want to add to our data log, and now we're going to open up the spreadsheet that has the data log in it. And for me, it's located in d/YouTube. Okay. So this workbook, I'll open that up for you so you can see. This workbook that we're opening with the code is actually our data log. So this is the data log of all the audits. So this is telling it where to log the data. So we're opening up this separate workbook, and then we're going to continue on with our code. So now that we have that workbook open, we need to activate it. So we'll say logsheet dot activate. So we're going to activate the log sheet. We didn't define the log sheet. Missed a few lines. Application dot screen updating equals true. So what we did is we turned screen updating off, so the user wouldn't see this open, or all the loading screens and everything. And then once we turn it back on, the screen updating back on, then it'll show that workbook open. We set it back to true, and then we define the log sheet variable. So we'll say log sheet, we'll set log sheet, set our log sheet variable equal to my log, which is this document right here, dot worksheets, and then scoring history. So now we're telling it what worksheet we want to activate. So we define the log sheet as this worksheet, and then we say activate it. And then once we have activated, we can say log sheet dot range A2 to dot select. So we're just going to select a cell in that worksheet. Okay, so once we have this A2 cell selected, then we're going to write a code that will add a row to our table, which is in that sheet. So we're going to say selection dot list object dot list row rows dot add. Always insert equals false. So we'll add a comment here. So we activate the log sheet. Nobody said coding was fun, that's for sure. But it is handy. So now we're going to find and set the last row number in the sheet. So we're going to find the last row in the column so we know where to add the data. So we're going to define that last row variable. So this is just a kind of a tricky piece of code. It's hard to explain, but what it does is it goes to the very last row in Excel, and then it goes up until it finds a row, and then it returns the row value for that number where it finds the last cell in Excel with the value in it. Kind of hard to explain. It'd be like hitting control down until you find the last row in the spreadsheet, and then hitting control up, and then returning the row value that it selects. So now we're going to export the data to the last row, which creates and logs the new entry. And this is going to be tedious again, but we're going to say log sheet dot range A and last row So just for example, if our if our last row is row 10, this will select column A, row 10, and then we're going to set that equal to our audit date variable. And we're just going to do this a bunch more times for each of the variables that we pull from the audit form. So go back to this, we can see we're basically using A through K for our values. So we're going to find the last row here, then insert the variables from the audit log sheet or the audit form sheet into this last row. So we're going to populate this row with this code. First one equals audit date, second one will be auditor, and the total deviations. All right, we're going to turn off any displayed alerts, so the workbook closes with no warnings. Then we're going to close that workbook, and save changes will set to true. I'm going to say application.display alerts equals true, so we activate those alerts again, and application.screen updating also equals true. Alright, so that is the code to log the data, and that's probably the most in-depth one, so the rest of them should be a little bit more easy from here on out, hopefully. Alright, so to create the PDF, we'll have to set some variables. Active sheet. So again, we're just setting the workbook and sheet that we want to work with. So what we're going to do within this code as well is actually generate the name of the PDF or the document. We're going to set it as the zone and the date the audit was done. So we'll need to define the zone variable. Zone equals range zone. Audit date equals range audit date. And then we're going to get the exact day, month, and year from that audit date value. So the audit day is going to equal day audit date. So that'll return the day value for whatever given date the audit was done. And then we're going to do the same thing for month and year. And I didn't label these correctly, so audit day, audit month, and audit year. And then we're going to build the file name using the zone and the audit date. My file name variable will equal zone and an underscore and audit month. This will generate the file name, and then we'll do some more error proofing. Say on error, resume next, application. Screen updating. Turn screen updating off, then we'll export the file. We'll export the PDF. I'm going to say mysheet.export as fixed format. Oops, the type be equal to Excel type PDF. The file name will be equal to, let's just say, file location. So we'll create a variable for that. File location and my file name and .pdf. And then another comma there. Then I'm going to add a underscore, which means that I can enter down a row, and this is all the same line of code. So we'll set the quality. Include set doc properties. It's true. And then lastly, we'll ignore print areas to false. I forgot a comma here. So there we go. That right there will export our document as a PDF. And then we just need to turn application screen updating back on. So before, when I made this routine, I named this wrong. I called it closed form. We actually want that to be clear form. Let's do that one next. So again, we'll define our variables, and then we're going to display a message box to the user that will ask them if they're sure they want to clear the form. And we'll set the message box type to VB yes no, so it'll give them a yes no option, and then we'll name the message box that shows clear form, and we'll say if X, or the value that our message box returned, equals 7, then exit sub. 7 is a value for no. I don't know why that is exactly. I'm sure there's some documentation out there, but basically we're saying if the value that this message box returns equals 7, which would be a no value, then we're going to exit the sub, and which won't clear the form then. Then we just have to write the code to clear all of the ranges, and we have to add this merge area property into this command because this range is actually a merge area. Okay, so just to show everyone, those named ranges show this. Okay, so we have the auditor range, which is right here. It's named auditor. So if this message box returns true or the user hits yes, then it'll clear the contents of this, the department, and then it'll also clear these values, which is the sort violations, anything in these cells as well, and then this one and the notes. So it's just going to clear out all those values so that we have a blank form. Next on the list is the email. So let's see how we can do that. We're going to dim email subject email. So all we're saying here is we're going to dim each one of these variables as a string, and then we're going to dim single as variant. Once we have the variables defined, we can set some more variables, and it's going to be the same type of thing we were doing before. Next, we'll set the variables for the email components. All right, so this will be setting things like the subject line and just basically building our email. Email body will be equal to auditor and space completed, their space and the zone that they completed, and CHR13, which is a character code for a return, or basically going a line down in the email body. We'll put in 2 of those, CHR audit day. Again, same as before. And I did not define that audit date variable, so let's go back and do that. I'll just copy it from here. Will equal the range audit date, the name range audit date. So now we have the email built, but now we want to add an attachment. We want to add that PDF that we made before. So what we're going to have to do is go back down to our PDF subroutine, and we're going to want to grab this, paste that up there. And I just realized I forgot to go back and add in this variable. So we want to define what the file location is. So here, let's just add a row here, file location equals, and you're going to enter in the file location of the audit form. Now I'm going to take this and copy it here. So the file location we're going to say is this folder. Make sure to add your own for that, and then we'll add the same thing here. We're going to define the file name as the name of the file, and then let's call this path. So then the file path will be the file location plus the file name, and we'll add a PDF at the end of that. Make sure we include the file extension. Then we'll add a little bit of error proofing again. Say on error. This time the error proofing is going to be a little bit better. Say on error, go to debugs. So now we're going to actually create the email with the variables that we defined earlier. Create object dot application. So we're going to basically open an instance of Outlook, and this needs a set in front of it. Set. We're creating an Outlook object. We're going to create an email basically, so we're just giving it a variable. So mail single is going to be our email. Create item, and then add 0, which basically just means we're creating an instance of a mail object. And then say with mail single, the subject is going to equal our email subject dot attachments dot add, and then we're going to add my file path. And then we're going to say .send and the with statement. The with statement is just a faster way of writing out code. Instead of writing mail single dot subject mail single dot to, we're just saying everything will be within that mail single object. And then if error or display error debugs. So this is our go-to from before. So this is the error proofing. If there's an error, it's going to go to this debugs line, and then we're going to say if error description does not equal blank. So if there is an error, then we're going to say message box description. So if there's an error, then we're just going to display to the user what the error was. So the last thing we need to do is add a routine to close the form if the user selects that option. So close form, and then we'll say set, we'll say audit form dot close, and then false, we do not want to save. So now that we have all of our routines, a few things we need to do with the user form still. We need to set some defaults. So we probably want all these selected by default. So if we go into the user form and then go to the initialize event, which basically is the event that runs when the user form is loaded, we can add some code in here as well. So we're going to say if, me is saying this user form, so me dot chk close equals true. We're just going to set all of our checkboxes equal to true. There we go. So now when the user form initializes, all those checkboxes will be checked true, and then we need to add the code that runs when the user hits click. So we're just going to say if user form one dot check clear form equals true, then we're going to run the clear form routine, which is in our module that we wrote out here. So we have a close form, we have a create PDF, we have a clear form, send email, and the log data. So we need to create an event or create a check to see if the checkbox is checked, and then if it is, we'll run each one of those. I just realized we'll need to add the PDF first. So we can't send an email with the PDF attachment if it doesn't exist, so we need to make sure we create a PDF first. So create PDF. Alright, and then the last one is to log the data. So check log data, then we're going to say log data. So once all those things run, then what we want to do is we want to unload the user form. And then we also want to create a cancel button routine. So when they click cancel, we'll just say unload Userform 1. So I just realized that these lines of code were actually out of order as well. If we were to have the clear form and close form checkboxes checked, that means that would actually clear the form and then close the form or the document before it could create a PDF, send the email, and log the data. So we need these at the end, otherwise it'll just clear everything out and close our documents before it gives us a chance to actually log the data and send the email and all that kind of stuff. So we need to put those two lines at the end, and that should be it. So we can close this and go back to the form sheet, and then when I click log audit data, it prompts us with our user form. The user has the option to check these checkboxes to select what things they want to do with the data in the form. I'm going to check off clear form and close form for now, and I'll hit OK, and that code will run, and screen updating is off, so all that stuff is happening and it's not showing anything to the user. So let's see if this worked. So first of all, let's check the program document or the log document so we can see if it actually logged our data. You can see right there, that's today. It did log our data, and we can check here. Here's our PDF, which it created. There's the PDF of that form. With the PDF, make sure to have like all the print area and all your printing settings set up correctly. So the print preview should be exactly what you want to see. Just make sure that's correct. What else? Email. Let's see if we got an email. Sure enough, it sent an email with that PDF attached right in the email. And the email notification says Mario Speedwagon completed their audit of zone F1. That's exactly what we want. Perfect. So that is how to create this automated audit form in VBA project.